Happy Tuesday, FM kids. It's great to be with you today, and I'm so excited to share with you our Bible lesson. But before I talk about the Bible story for today, I want to share with you 3 things that I was thinking about this week that are kind of related to our story. The first thing I was thinking about was how I loved to play games when I was a kid. Well, I kind of like to play games still as an adult. Do you like playing games? I loved a lot of outdoor games like kickball or follow the leader or hopscotch or a lot of other kinds of games maybe that you enjoy playing when we're at school together or maybe just when we're out with our friends. I was also thinking about how this last year, maybe this is true for you too, a lot of us have been baking or cooking or making recipes. Pastor Colleen on Sunday talked about how she, every holiday, likes to make ginger snaps. And this year, one of the things that I learned how to make was scones. Oh, they are so delicious. Have you or anybody in your family been baking or cooking special things this year? I was thinking about that. And the third thing I was thinking about is I was thinking about the Christmas lights that we have been seeing. One of the things we love to do this holiday season is to drive around to different neighborhoods and look at Christmas lights. Now, last year, before the pandemic happened, we went with some friends to look at Christmas lights, but I didn't actually know where all the neighborhoods were. So they had a car, we had a car, and I had to drive around behind them to kind of see where we were going. Now, so let's see, we talked about playing games as a kid, we talked about baking or cooking, and we talked about driving around and looking at Christmas lights. And what would those 3 things have in common? Well, all 3 of those stories have to do with following. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing, playing a game, again, one of my favorite games to play when I was probably about your age was follow the leader. So I would get in a line with all of my friends, someone would be in the front, and they would do something weird, right? They would hop, or they would skip, or they would turn around in circles, and everyone behind them would try to pay attention and to copy what they were doing. It was almost harder for me to be the leader because I didn't know what weird things I could do, but it was certainly fun to be in the back and to follow what the leader was doing. Let's see, when we're baking, if you've ever baked or cooked something with maybe your parents or with other people in your family, you know that one thing that's very important is to follow directions. Pastor Colleen talked about maybe some times where she forgot to follow the directions. I've done that plenty of times. And then what you're making doesn't turn out to be quite as good. And so it's very important to pay attention to the ingredients, pay attention to all of the steps, and to follow all of the directions to make sure that your recipe comes out perfect. The third thing, I was thinking about driving around looking at Christmas lights. I mentioned that last year I didn't really know where to go, where all the best lights were, but my friend did. And so I had to make sure to follow him. He was driving in his car, I was driving in my car, so I had to make sure to follow him. I had to watch his turn signal when he was turning onto a different street. I had to watch his brake lights so that I didn't bump into him, right? I had to learn to follow him and to know where he was going so that I could be at the right place and I could be hanging out with my friends. So you can imagine that the theme of our Bible story today is going to involve following. And our Bible story actually occurs in the book of Mark. Before we talk about Jesus, I want you to think about other ways that you can follow. What do you think about following? If you can talk to your mom or dad there about following, well, you could talk about following directions. You could talk about following things that they ask you to do. You might follow the steps that a teacher might give you in order to do something, or you might follow around with what your friends are doing. If your friend wants to play a board game, you might want to play as well. If your friend wants to watch a movie, you might want to watch a movie with them. So this theme today is going to deal with following. And again, we're in the book of Mark. It's not named after me, just same name. Book of Mark. And we're going to look in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Now, I'm not going to read those chapters. You can sit down with your mom and dad and read those chapters. But in Mark chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, they all have a part inside of those chapters where they talk about Jesus walking around. This is early in Jesus' ministry. He was probably about 30 years old. And even though he had relationships with a lot of people in his town, he hadn't really started talking to people about how he was the Son of God. But they talk in the book of Mark about how he came up to some fishermen named James and John and asked them to be his disciples. And the Bible says immediately they got up from their nets and they followed him. He went around to other people who were also fishermen or tax collectors or doing other things. And he asked them to be disciples, to come along with him and to help him. And the Bible says that immediately they got up and followed him. Now, can you imagine what it must have been like to be called by Jesus to follow him? Well, how do you think they felt? Do you think they were proud? Jesus picked me to follow him. Do you think they were excited? Hey, we're going to get to do some great things. Do you think that they were nervous? Oh, I don't know what he wants me to do. Do you think they might have even been a little bit scared? Probably, I think that his followers had a lot of those different emotions where they were excited about following Jesus, but they were also a little bit nervous about what that means. And the truth of the Bible is that not only did Jesus call his 12 disciples, not only were there hundreds of other people that aren't really named in the Bible, that they say that Jesus called them disciples as well to follow him, but Jesus even calls us today. And it's interesting to think that Jesus calls us just like he called his disciples when he was on earth thousands of years ago. How do you think you would feel if you knew Jesus was calling you to follow him? Would you be excited? Would you be a little bit nervous? A little bit scared? Maybe you might ask, what does it even mean to follow Jesus when he calls us? And I think we can look at 3 things that it means for us to follow Jesus. The first is that I think it means paying attention to God. Now, this is very important because whenever you follow, you have to pay attention. Remember I said in Follow the Leader, if you're not paying attention to what the leader is doing, then you're not going to follow him or her correctly. When you bake a recipe, if you're not paying attention to the ingredients, if you're not paying attention to every step, then what you make, what comes out of the oven, probably isn't going to taste as good. And if you're driving around in a car following a friend, if you're not paying attention to where they're going, then you might get lost or you might get left behind. So it's very important for us first to pay attention to God. What does Jesus want us to do in certain situations? Second, I think that following Jesus means doing what he says even when it's hard. Sometimes when the Bible says to love your enemies, when Jesus says love other people as yourself, sometimes I feel like saying, yeah, I just don't want to do that. But following Jesus means listening to what he says and to actually doing it, right? Following means to actually be doing what they ask us to do. And sometimes that can be hard. It can be hard to be nice to your brother or sister when they're being mean to you. Sometimes it can be hard to hold back and not get really angry and say that horrible thing when you're really feeling frustrated. And so I want you to talk to your parents about how you can continue to do what Jesus says even when it's hard. And the third thing that I think following means is to figure out how we can listen to God. We talk all the time in Sunday school and FM Kids about 2 different ways that we can listen to God. We can listen to God by reading the Bible, just like we're talking about today, reading about what's written about Jesus and what he says, and also by praying to him. Jesus speaks very personally to every one of us. And I know that you guys in FM Kids, many of you have told me how God has spoken something to you personally that's very important. And so I think during this time, especially maybe when we're not with our friends as much, when we're at home by ourselves a little bit more, that it's good to read the Bible, maybe have our mom and dad help us with that, and then also to pray and to ask God to speak to us. Because in all of those ways, we will know how to follow him the best. I promise, when we get back together, we're going to have a great big game of following the leader. I look forward to playing games with you guys. Maybe we'll even bake some recipes where we can get back to doing that. And we can enjoy following Jesus together. Have a great Tuesday. Have a great week. Know we love you, miss you, and can't wait seeing you again. Bye-bye.